Hey, Ann Claire.
How are you?
I'm lovely today. I keep thinking of that song. I think it's by Bill Withers. He goes, lovely day. And then it goes, lovely day, lovely day, lovely day. Do you know that song?
No.
No?
But I love this version. I mean, maybe I know it, but I'm not realizing.
It's a really cool song, but it's like, he just goes, the background's like, lovely day, lovely day, lovely day. And then he's just singing lovely day, like this really long note. It's the best. It's one of my favorite songs.
Okay. I might know it and just not realize that that's the song, but I will definitely check it out. I would like Bob to transform this into the new little musical intro for our show.
I'm almost positive you've heard this song before, unless I'm almost positive you have. I think I just botched it.
Hold on, I'm going to pull it up. It might not work, but I just really...
Yeah, that's it.
And the sunlight hurts my eyes. Something without wanting love bears heavy on my mind. Then I look at you, and the world's all right with me. Just one look at you, and I know it's gonna be a lovely day.
I loved it. So that was the musical introduction today. Thank you, Meg, for showcasing your singing talents and dancing talents. Because let's be real, that was
like.
I feel like we're ready for the next dancing party in Portugal.
Oh heck yeah! I'm so ready.
I just liked this song so that I have it on my Spotify. So I will make sure to bring it up again.
Oh, good. This song follows my life. Like I hear it all the time in restaurant stuff. Like it's just one of those songs I always hear. So,
well, let's continue this lovely day with a question. Someone's wondering if we can help them understand what an eating disorder self is.
Well, I mean, it's kind of an interesting concept, especially if you've always been like, I'm myself. What do you mean by an eating disorder self? And I think baseline, what we want to think about when it comes to recovery is that when you develop an eating disorder, your like internal humanness gets kind of divided into two parts. There's an eating disorder part, and then there's your authentic self. And we call that your healthy self or higher self. And so the eating disorder part is trying with all its might to do something helpful for you, but it's carrying out that function in a very like unhelpful way. So the eating disorder self may have been created when you were a kid to keep you safe, to keep you feeling in control, to keep you feeling special or accepted. And so as a human, you've kind of patterned your life around this eating disorder self that's trying its best to have your best interest in mind, but it's not doing that anymore. And it's turning into something very harmful for your life. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah, I like that. I often use very, very similar words to explain sort of like how I see it if I'm like working with a client and we're sort of exploring this new concept. Because it's really like, your alarm bell goes off for any reason, like something happens. And it's like you develop an eating disorder because that becomes your response to something. And so you've got a part of you that usually grows and ends up taking up a lot of space that is trying to do a bunch of stuff. that probably had like, a reasonable function at a time, right? Like eating disorders happen for a reason. They show up, they're trying to do something for us, typically make us feel safe, make us feel okay, acceptable, loved, like, bunch of stuff. And well, they're kind of taking a bit too much space, right? It's sort of like an alarm system on crack. It's like everything is a danger and everything is fixed by changing your body, using food in a certain way, using movement in a certain way, right? That's sort of like how it's looking at life and its problems. It's like, oh, something's going on. Let's use the eating disorder hammer to like, get the, hit the nail. And then it's like, no, it's not a nail. It's actually, I don't know, a broken window and you're just slamming it.
Right. Like the eating disorder self believes that food and body and controlling that is going to solve your deeper problems. Right. And so that's where the eating disorder recovery work happens, because you have to learn to stop turning to your eating disorder self to cope for those problems in life and those emotions and feelings. And I think one natural question that people might be asking right now is like, how do you identify this eating disorder self if it's not this like tangible person that you can see? Like, how do you identify this day to day if it's inside of you? So what are some tips you have for people like who are just starting out trying to be like, okay, so how do I know when my eating disorder self is in control?
I like to go to, like the observation that we all narrate life and that we all make choices, right? And so I'm like, okay, so typically I'm going to have a kind of like, what's a behavior that is like a disorder behavior, right? Like, oh, I tell myself I can't have that kind of food or I can't eat before this hour. And I'm like, okay, so clearly, you're hearing the thought, something inside of you suggesting, let's not eat that or let's not eat before this time. Let me ask you, like, if your brother, sister, mom, dad, came up to you and said, like, shouldn't have that at all, right? They could even say, I've had a really hard day. It sounds like a good idea to not eat that, right? And you'd probably be like, no. I mean, I would ask, right? What would you say? They'd probably like, yeah, that's not going to work. Like, your day's not going to get better. I'm like, okay, interesting. So why is that a thing for you, not for them? Clearly, there are two different parts within you that coexist, except one of them shows up for you and the other one shows up for someone else. And I mean, I would probably like tweak it to sort of match, the client, but I like say someone is struggling with over-exercise, to be like, okay, but why? And then I don't know, they give me a reason and I'm asking, okay, what about someone else? Often I will start with the what about someone else and I bring in someone else into the picture because that can help them sort of start to see, oh, I do have two different scenarios, and narrators in my head. But for some reason, one of them is kind of loud when it comes to my choices. How do you do it?
I really like that. I really like that approach, like introducing that third person in to show that there are multiple scenarios at play. I usually just ask people to start observing their thoughts throughout the day and recognizing, okay, and their emotions and the feelings in their body. So I start with the observational study in a way, like, okay, we're going to task you this week to, track your thoughts around meal times, track your emotions, track the feelings in your body, and start to notice the patterns when the eating disorder is there. So if you have that critical voice telling you you shouldn't have that, you should compensate for that, you should feel guilty for this, you're a horrible person, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, what's the loop that usually starts to queue up when the eating disorder is present? Because the eating disorder is very unoriginal. It's not going to think a ton of original thoughts. It usually has like a few that it just keeps yelling at you, right? So what's the loop? And also, if you can't really tune into those thoughts right away, like how is your body reacting, right? And what emotions are present when you notice your eating disorder is around, right? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling shut down? Are you feeling overtired? Like,
yeah, it's so interesting because like in the data collecting phase. If someone says like, I don't know, like I don't have thoughts. It's just like, I just do it. Like I just restrict, or I just binge, or I just purge. I'm like, you know what? Next time you show up in front of, your fridge to start preparing dinner, say, because you're restricting and like, it just happens that you have the things, but it doesn't end up on your plate. At that point in time, you pause for 5 minutes and you're like, let me brain dump what's going on. Or, when it's like, say someone struggles with purging, I'm like, you know what? Next time you end up, in your bathroom, for example, I want you to just like try in that moment or voice message me, like literally, like take your phone, voice message me, and we'll be collecting thoughts. Like I guarantee you, the thing yelling at you right before, the situation in your head, that's going to be your eating disorder self. That's not going to be your healthy self. So we can tap into it, no problem. Like that will be accessible.
Yeah. Well, Carolyn Costin teaches us one of the tools as a coach is to encourage people to journal before using a behavior.
Yeah.
Even gather information while journaling after a behavior. Taking that journal entry and literally bringing it into your coaching session and talking about, okay, what is my eating disorder voice saying? Like, what is the content of this? What is the tone? Who does this sound like? Going deep into, okay, where did I learn this stuff? Like you can dissect that eating disorder voice.
And this is the magic. Like that is really like that the thing you're talking about right now, like dissecting, understanding, that is where we collect the information on what on earth is your eating disorder actually trying to do for you. Yeah. Which then gets us to, okay, is it actually doing it? Because sometimes it's very questionable whether or not it's actually doing what it says it's doing. And then if it is doing it, what is the price that you pay for it? And this is how we shift this job fulfilling, by your eating disorder self with new options. And that is really an exploration, right? There's no cookie cutter answer. It is not like one magic thing for everyone, unfortunately. But this is where we really put your eating disorder out of a job. And you can only get there when you understand what it's trying to do. And so I love, the whole like data gathering piece. It's so important because where else are we going to figure out what that eating disorder is trying to do, what that part of you developed to protect you from or help you cope with or numb out or,
And if you are confused about whether your thoughts are eating disorder thoughts or healthy self thoughts, a question I always like to have clients come back to is this thought coming from a place of love or fear? And usually an eating disorder is just shrouded in fear.
I like to go with tone, emotion, and consequence. Like, what does it sound like? Typically, if it sounds like a butthole, or a drill sergeant, or, that really mean voice, red flag. If it sounds like a mom, even if it's like a strict mom, could be like, and I'm not saying your mom, like a mothering figure. Like sometimes people are like, yeah, but I'm not talking about your mom specifically.
You don't know my mom.
Emotion. Like if it's creating like stress and like tension and anxiety and whatever, okay, just observe. Like sometimes a healthy self can create anxiety, like for quote unquote good reasons, right? Because it's like, I'm challenging something, but just notice and the consequences. I mean, come on, is the consequence of the action that this part of you is suggesting getting you closer or further from recovery? There's typically just two directions, like
that one like, alone. Observational study is kind of like, noticing the tone, noticing the, what it's sounding like. But then the consequence is a bigger picture thing. Like, is this going to lead me towards recovery or not? Like, what path am I taking? That's a really good way to figure out quickly if this is an eating disorder voice or a healthy voice. And I really like that.
And if you like the someone else question, you can always throw in, what would I recommend a friend in my shoes in this situation? Like, I know this doesn't resonate with everyone and that's completely okay. But if that does, you can use that shortcut to sort of help you out. Another thing I sometimes throw in, sort of depending on, people's temperament and preferences, is like, in 1 year's time, what decision will you be happier that you have done, like chosen?
That's good.
In 5 years' time, which one would you have actually preferred? That can help sort of have a feel, of the situation and where it's taking you in case, because eating disorders are really good at being really confusing. I'm not going to lie. So sometimes we have to peel a few layers to understand a bit better, but
right. Like tell your future self, thank you for what I'm doing right now. And it's like, probably yes, probably no. Like you can see, again, it's that consequence piece. And then my final thing that I always it's becoming very clear. When you are just stuck in a state of confusion, if this is your healthy self or your eating disorder self, confusion is a sign that eating disorder is probably present. Like just baseline, because eating disorders like to gaslight you and like make you feel confused so that you keep them around, right? You are protecting that part of you at all costs. So that confusion is serving you because the eating disorder gets to stay if you're confused. So if you are just always confused about, decisions you're making, food choices, all the things, I like to say most of the time that's because the eating disorders in there.
Yep.
Things. Food doesn't be complicated.
It's so true. And if you then get to the question of, but then what choice do I make? This might be the typical example where, you need someone else to help you out for a little while with those choices. This is why it's so key, for example, for food choices to have a qualified, specialized dietitian on your team. Because for a while, your eating disorder is going to be so confusing. And so having someone that you can trust tell you, hey, this really is a supportive choice, gives you like a hard reference that you can go back to and be like, you know what? I don't know. There's a fight inside my head. It's really confusing. Well, I'm going with that. Like someone that I trust that is qualified, that has an opinion that I can trust, has given me an option here. I'm going to go with that. That is one of the moments, situations where a dietitian has so much value and can help you out tremendously.
I love that piece of advice too. You can trust your team.
That's what we're there.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to make it ultra clear that the point of your team is to be a temporary reference point. I never pretend to be the reference point like that. I don't like seeing myself, I don't see myself as an authority, right? I like to see myself as helping clients figure things out so that they can trust themselves. But unfortunately, when your eating disorder self is really, really loud, it's kind of hard, right? Because everything's coming from inside of you. So it can be truly confusing to know, everything's coming from inside of me. How do I know that this is the part of me that I can trust? And how do I know that this is a part of me that I can't trust? So when we suggest to refer to an entity outside of you, it's not because we think that we're so amazing and that it's so great to trust other humans, instead of diet culture. I don't think you should put your reference point outside of yourself for your entire life. This is a temporary measure, right? Just to be extra clear. The point in the long term is for everyone to have that internal compass that is available to them, that they can tune into and they know for themselves. Because sometimes I know for me, every time someone tells me I should do something, I'm like, I really don't like it. I feel like it's someone's putting me in danger of not being autonomous and making my own choices. And this is not the point, right? So that's why I'm saying this. I feel like to an extent, I might have an allergic reaction to authority telling me what I should do.
It's temporary.
It's temporary.
Yeah, it's just temporary. I like that reminder. The whole point of this process is learning to trust yourself, down the road. But having a team, again, there's no shame in having that team that you can rely on while you are working towards building that healthier self.
And I wanted to add, in case someone's and then what? Well, then what is simply, imagine you're 100% battery charge, as a human. I'm just going to give random percentages, but let's say you start recovery work. And basically, when you're looking at choices, your eating disorder talks for like 90% of the time, right? And the idea isn't to take away from the 90. The idea is to understand the 90 and then figure out how that 10% of you, your healthy self, can start doing the job or the jobs that your eating disorder self is trying to do for you and taking up space for. So you're literally like the same 100%, that's all of you. And you're just growing your healthy self so that it takes care of more, so that your eating disorder self simply doesn't have to show up, right? It's not that we're saying don't use your eating disorder like behaviors without giving you an alternative. We do realize that's not reasonable, like that's not realistic. We need to replace that with something. So we're looking at this process as strengthening your healthy self, not as taking away your eating disorder self. And this is why it works, because you're still the 100%. You're just growing that little, like smaller, more quieter, like part of you so that it can take more space until you simply don't need your eating disorder anymore.
I appreciate that nice little reminder at the end. Just recommend we're not taking away anything from you. The point isn't to extinguish and kill the eating disorder part. It's just to put it back in check, right? So the healthy self is growing and taking up more space. That is good. That is good, Anne Claire.
Thank you. Are you going back to dancing?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Meg, for coming and joining me today. As always, freaking lovely to speak to you and see your lovely face on my Zoom. Can't wait to see you in real life.
I can't wait to see you in real life. And I hope you have a lovely day.
Okay. Bye, people.
Okay.